you're not going to pass policy legislation that's going to continue to disproportionately impact not only black people, but brown people. So I think you can most certainly be a conservative and a minority, but being a Republican right now during the age of Trump, I think is a very difficult thing.
Michael, you want to?
No, absolutely right. I mean, which is why Sir Michael happens to be one of my favorite Republicans.
What is up, everyone? Today we're diving into Bill Maher's show where, as usual, the anti-Trump crew is out in full force. But here's the twist. One of Maher's guests actually lands some punches on Maher himself. They're debating minorities in the Republican Party, Trump's rise, and the supposed racism of his base. As always, the left loves to twist facts to fit their tired narrative. Let's break it down, call out the nonsense, and have a little fun along the way. Let's get into it.
That the base of the Republican Party was in a completely different place than the elites in Washington thought. The elites in Washington were still reciting the Reagan formula: free trade, expansionist foreign policy, entitlement reform. The base of the party is now a white working class base that wants to hear about Mexicans, Muslims, and Chinese people. They want to hear about how the Mexicans are taking your jobs, the Chinese people are taking your factories, the Muslims are killing you. Trump says, I'll beat them all up, you'll be great again.
But that
was Trump's one-hour speech in one line, by the way.
But let me push back against that a little bit. I mean, the fact is, there were like 16 Republicans running in the primaries. Right. And Trump did not get a majority of Republican support during the primaries. He got a plurality, and he won in a lot of places. But the fact that it was so divided, the fact that the party had no discipline whatsoever. I mean, I'd sort of like to bring back the smoke-filled rooms. Let's have some, vetting of people before they decide to run for president, for goodness sake.
Nothing.
Yeah, but I mean,
But you can't diminish what Trump did as a political matter. I mean, whether you want a plurality or not. He had 16 opponents, many of them governors, senators, and he just slaughtered them all, one by one, without really any impediment.
Okay, now, this is what they don't want to admit. Trump didn't just beat the Republican field in 2016, he embarrassed them. 16 opponents, many of them seasoned politicians, and they all went down like bowling pins. Why? Because Trump wasn't playing their game. He didn't care about appeasing donors or sticking to politically correct talking points. He spoke directly to the people, and guess what? They listened. Meanwhile, the establishment candidates were out there quoting Reagan like it was 1984 and wondering why no one cared. Trump understood that the voters didn't want more of the same. They wanted someone who would actually fight for them. And let's be honest, watching Trump bulldoze his opponents one by one was like watching a sports highlight reel. You can hate the guy all you want, but you can't deny the results.
Anything holding it back. And now, I think the more relevant point that Bill's making is today, the never Trump rump is diminished, dwindled to almost nothing. Yeah, you've got this incredibly high, historic, as I said before, historic level of support among Republicans. And no one, even though you can, at least at the beginning of the administration, you looked at people like Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell and said, well, they're going along with Trump to get their agenda done. Well, they got their tax cut, and now today they're still
not standing up. Apparently they have no other agenda.
They're afraid of the base. They know the base is with them.
I know.
All right, this is now the party of Trump.
I'm not sure if you guys heard that, but he said this is now the party of Trump, which is absolutely correct. And that's honestly what drives the left crazy. Trump reshaped the GOP into a party that actually represents its voters. No more endless wars, no more outsourcing American jobs, and no more bowing to the corporate elites. Instead, it's about putting America first, securing borders, and keeping government out of people's lives. What a concept, right? And let's be clear, the party of Trump isn't some cult like the media loves to portray. It's a moment of people who are sick and tired of being ignored. The left wants to paint this as some scary authoritarian takeover, but really it's a democracy in action. The voters spoke and Trump listened, and it's funny how the left only has a problem with populism when it's not on their side.
Another question in, let's get these people spend time writing these questions. Let's get This is for you, Sir Michael. You said you can be a minority and a conservative, but can you be a minority and a Republican under this administration?
You know, that's a good question. I think that the expectation, at least from what I get from talking to other African Americans and minorities in general, is that sure, we don't have a problem with you being a Republican, but our expectation is that you are articulating the concerns of our community. So yes, I'm a black person who happens to be a Republican. That doesn't mean I don't care about police brutality. That doesn't mean I don't care about criminal justice reform. Those are issues that disproportionately impact my community. And it is my duty, if you will, when I'm at that table, when I'm in those meetings, to advocate for the issues of my community, because I recognize realize there will be moments like the moment we see now, where you have a Jeff Sessions running the criminal justice system. And he's rolling back a lot of things that President Obama did with bipartisan support that benefited African Americans. So it is my charge to say, wait a minute here, you're not going to pass policy legislation that's going to continue to disproportionately impact not only black people, but brown people. So I think you can most certainly be a conservative and a minority, but being a Republican right now during the age of Trump, I think is a very difficult thing.
Difficult? Try being a Democrat who has to explain their inflation excuses at Thanksgiving. Look, the age of Trump isn't difficult for Republicans. It's difficult for the establishment that's been living in their bubble for decades. What Trump did was expose how out of touch the elites are, and not just with conservatives, but with everyday Americans. If you think that's difficult, wait until you see what happens when those same voters stop tolerating your policies. What's next? Complaining that self-reliance is a burden?
Michael, you want to?
No, absolutely right. I mean, which is why Sir Michael happens to be one of my favorite Republicans. Because what we've seen is a lack.
Big of you.
Oh, I mean.
Pretty short list.
Some of your best friends are Republicans.
You know,
you're telling us?
y'all are taking all my good lines. But the thing is that if you have black people who understand, even if you're associated with that administration, that what Trump is doing is undercutting the value of not only black people, but Republicans, as we've been saying. And the fact that you had William Coleman, the fact that you had a legacy of black people, Jackie Robinson for that matter, who were Republicans, who understood that it was about an economic orientation of fiscal conservatism. It was not about the culture wars that Trump seems invested in, because one of the factors we missed in all of this brouhaha is the demonization of the big black boogeyman, Barack Obama.
Oh, please, man. I mean, this boogeyman narrative is nothing but a distraction. Barack Obama wasn't criticized because of his race. He was criticized because his policies were a disaster. Remember the skyrocketing healthcare premiums under Obamacare? Or how about the endless apologies on the world stage while China and Russia ran circles around us? But sure, let's ignore all of that and pretend it's about skin color. And by the way, if Obama's record is so untouchable, why do his defenders always reach for the race card instead of addressing the actual critiques? It's like they know that the policies don't hold up under scrutiny, so they default to calling out everyone racist. It's a tired strategy and people are catching on. Criticizing Obama doesn't make you racist, it makes you informed in just having an opinion.
And that spooked a lot of people into voting for the Republicans in a serious way.
But you know, Dr. Dyson, I disassociate myself as a black conservative with what we call lily white conservatism, that sort of wallows in racism, if you will, bigotry, sexism, if you will. And I think you have to make a clear distinction between the two. And where the Republican Party screws up time and time again.
How do you do this? I can understand how you could do it when the Republican Party was a party that was about economics and free markets and free. Right now, the Republican Party is defined by its suspicion and hostility toward people who look different, sound different, worship different gods. So what do you, that's the party. How are you distinguishing yourself?
Well, look, Fareed, you know, President Trump talks a lot about patriotism to the country. When we say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, we say one nation, under God, indivisible, et cetera, et cetera. One nation, under God, indivisible. One nation. Rhetoric or reality? Do we truly believe we are one nation? And if we are, then that means we recognize and we accept that we are a country compounded of different folks from all over the world, regardless of what they look like, their sex, or their religion.
Now, I do agree with this point, but this is rich coming from the same crowd that divides Americans into every identity category under the sun. One nation, sure, I'd love that, but how can we be one nation when the left constantly pits people against each other based on race, gender, and class? Unity isn't possible when you're telling half the country they're irredeemable bigots just for voting differently. And let's not pretend Trump is the one dividing people. He didn't create these divisions, he simply exposed them. The left doesn't want unity, they want submission. They want everyone to agree with their worldview, and if you don't, you're the enemy. That's not unity. If we really want to be one nation, maybe start by respecting different opinions, and that's just a start.
Well, that's not how a lot of your fellow Republicans look at it.
Donald Trump certainly, but Donald Trump certainly doesn't look at him. All you had to do is look at, you know, Hurricane Maria and look what happened in Puerto Rico.
But we've allowed him, Linda, to define
I wouldn't wait for your
Americans.
invitation to the CPAC convention.
Oh, that's not coming anytime soon.
And there you have it, folks. Bill Maher's guests tried their best to spin the usual anti-Trump narratives, but as always, the truth cuts through the noise. What do you think? Is the party of Trump a bad thing, or is it exactly what the GOP needed? Let me know in the comments. Hit subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys in the next one.